Right, good news stories. What better introduction than to introduce Mr. Darren Capes to the stage. Darren.
Thank you, Steve. So, a quick Google has just informed me that a panjandrum is a powerful person or self-important official. So I'm taking the former, not the latter, but I'll let you decide, and we'll maybe use Slido and decide over lunch which you think it is. Right. So I think that was obviously a great setting from Steve and Anthony there, a great sort of setting for the day and why we're here. And I'm pleased they said what they said, because that leads really into what I'm going to talk about. And I'm glad it looks like we've actually spoken to each other about this, even though we haven't, because we're saying the same thing. So I'm going to expand on this point that Stephen made and Anthony's just made as well about the sector. We do great things, but we have to prove that. And we work now in the government with ministers who are receptive to technology as a solution to the problems they face, but it's not a solution in itself. And we are not focused on technology just because technology is great and we all know it's great. We're focused on technology as a way of delivering solutions. So the next 15 minutes or so, I just want to talk about some of the work we've done. And it's going to be a bit of a backslapping session, because I want to talk about some of the great things we've done over the last year. I want to talk about TSOG, GLF and ITMF. So the Traffic Signals Obsolescence Grant, the Green Light Fund and the Intelligent Traffic Management Fund. Now, about a year ago, just over a year ago, at the Elk Creek Strictly Highways event in Blackpool, I had about as near to a rock star moment as one can ever have as a traffic engineer, when I stood on stage with the words £70 million in 6-foot-high letters behind me. And that was the point when we announced the fact that through Plan for Drivers, which as Anthony said was at the peak of its kind of importance at that point, we had secured £70 million worth of funding for traffic signal maintenance. And that certainly, I stand to be corrected, but I think certainly as long as I've been around, that is easily the biggest amount of money that the government's ever put into traffic technology at a local level. So it was a fantastic opportunity, and I spoke at the time. I spoke a little bit about the mechanics of how the funding would work and how the bidding process would work and all that sort of thing. But actually, the real point was to say that this is an opportunity for us not to mess up. It's an opportunity for us to take that money and deliver and really show that the sector can deliver. What for the sector is a huge amount of money, £70 million. But for a government that, I work for an organisation that buys aircraft carriers. For the organisation in general, it's not that big a chunk of money. It's quite a small chunk of money. And if we can show that we can make real impact in communities across England with that chunk of money, that would be a great thing. That would be a great thing, not just in terms of delivering that, but in terms of moving on and proving the case and making it easy to secure investment in the future. Delivering that £70 million was key. That was the challenge, really. So we got TSOG and GLF money out before the general election. We got that out in April. We provided £50 million, £30 million into TSOG, £20 million into GLF, and we used that as an opportunity to really drive the sector forward. And we funded, I think it was about 60 authorities got a big chunk of money. Every authority in England that was eligible got some money, and we gave you the challenge to set off and start spending that and delivering improvement, delivering better technology, making life better for network users. And what happened? Well, it went very well. And we're now starting to see that. And I've picked on Rotherham. Where's Rotherham? Rotherham in the room somewhere. I've picked on Rotherham because Rotherham have done very well, even though everyone else has done very well. They've done even better. They are showing what's possible. And there's a quote there which I'm not going to read through, but that's James Drinkle from Rotherham MBC. We asked him for a quote because we wrote an article which you can see on the TTF website. We also found that fantastic photograph, which I think is brilliant because it shows new technology, it shows people fixing stuff. Maybe it shows the next generation of traffic signal engineers. Or maybe she just stood there thinking, what the hell is he talking about? I don't know. But it's a great photograph. But the point of that is this was Rotherham showing that spending the money made a difference. They've provided new infrastructure. Some work we've done even more recently shows that probably has had an impact on traffic. It's reduced travel times, potentially reduced congestion. It's made life easier for pedestrians. It's provided new technology, new infrastructure at the roadside. It's done an awful lot of good. Now we need to hoover that up and I think, Anthony, your phrase was hoover and harvest. We need to harvest all this experience that we're seeing. We need to hoover it up and then feed it back into government. And that's what we need to do. And that's what we're starting to see with TSOG and GLF. So we need to build on that. Progress so far has been great. We think about 1,000 schemes are likely to be delivered across England using this funding, which is a fantastic number when you think about it. And when you think £70 million will probably buy you, a quarter of a new motorway junction. At the scale that we're working at, the interventions that we're making, it's going to deliver schemes right across England that will all have some benefit. Maybe not to the extent that some people are seeing like Rotherham, but they will all have some benefit to the communities that they're in. That's really important. And I need to thank you all for doing that. I need to thank you all for providing the updates onto the TTF website that allow us to have that figure. Because we know, because you've all provided programmes of works, we know what you aspire to do with that funding. So thank you for doing that. Thank you also for providing the grant declarations back to us. So we now have an auditable process that says, yes, we gave the money out, the authorities understood what it was for, they've got their senior officers to write back and tell us that their authorities are spending the money as we said it would. And that's really important because that gives our auditors already this early in the process some certainty that the money has been spent on the things that we want it to be spent on. So thank you all that have done that. There's around 40 of you haven't yet provided declaration letters for the end of October deadline. It's not that long ago, but if you could, that would be fantastic because, again, that helps show that as a sector we are trusted. We can be trusted with this money. We will spend it on the things we said we'd spend it on. And that's really important in terms of our feeling of certainty when we hand grant out, that the money will be spent how we want it to be spent. And again, it's important because the grant's gone to so many different people to deliver so many different things that it'd be quite easy for bits of grant to get diverted to do other things and lost and whatever, but we can see that's not happening, so that's really important for us. You need to keep us updated with progress, and again, I thank you for the ones of you that are, because there's an important lesson here, which I'll come to in a second, which is about understanding how this plays out, understanding just how much do we actually deliver. We know materials are getting more expensive, we know that components can be hard to source, we know that labour is hard to find and there are skill shortages. So we fully understand that we may not deliver across the country the entire programme that we said we would because of increasing costs and availability and everything. But we need to know that. You need to keep updating the programme so we can see that. We can get a feel for how the pressures that we are all feeling out there on the street are actually impacting us. So providing updated programmes is very important. Gives us that picture. Allows us to speak back to ministers with some certainty about what the expectations of spending money in this sector should be. We've talked a bit about the budget, and just looking at the press release there from the government website, Chancellor chooses a budget to rebuild Britain. This is from the budget statement made a couple of weeks ago. The budget will help rebuild Britain by boosting public sector investment by over £100 billion in the next 5 years. There will be an extra £500 million to fix for local road maintenance. The money that we spent so far, the £70 million, was a slice of road maintenance. Well, sorry, the £50 million that we spent on GLF and TSOG was a slice of road maintenance. It came from the argument that maintaining roads isn't just about fixing surface defects and dealing with drainage and structures. That's very important. Road maintenance is also about maintaining the technology infrastructure. That was the argument that got us the TSOG and GLF money. If more money is going into road maintenance, surely it's logical that we make the same argument, that a sliver of that, a slice of that, should go to maintain technology. And it might, it's not guaranteed, but it could if we can make the right argument. And the success we're seeing with TSOG and GLF is the key to making that argument. So the prize is there. There is money around. There is potential. As we come out of the infrastructure review and the transport infrastructure review, and we start to think about how that informs the integrated transport strategy that we will see, this type of work, the work that we're doing, is key to us making the case for reliable infrastructure being essential to how you deliver the future transport services. Now, governments generally focus on shiny new things. We like shiny new stuff to build. We particularly like stuff you can put a ribbon on and cut with a pair of gold-plated scissors. We like that. What we're saying is, no, actually, the opposite is true here. What we really need here is good maintenance of what we have. And actually, if you maintain things that we have better, if you spend £500,000 maintaining the technology you have, you'll probably get better performance from that than actually buying something new. So it's important that we're able to make that point. It's important that we have the evidence to get government to understand that. In the same way that maintaining roads is about maintaining them, it's not about necessarily building new roads. So with technology, repairing and upgrading and making sure existing technology works to its most efficient capability is as valuable, maybe more valuable than new investment. And that's how we get additional funding. That's how we ensure that some very small slices of those big numbers end up in this sector. And that's how we ensure that this isn't the last TTF meeting and that we all get to come to this fantastic auditorium next year and talk about how we've spent even more money successfully and delivered even more schemes. So what are the next steps? Well, we are starting to think about some tools that will allow us to do that. So we are starting to think about proving our performance. We're starting to think about how we work with other parts of the department, so our modelling and evaluation colleagues in the department who are able to produce evaluations that not just look good, but actually work in terms of, are rigorous in terms of how government does evaluations, are rigorous in terms of producing numbers that people like the Treasury will actually believe, which is quite a high bar, and it's quite a difficult thing to evaluate things in that rigorous way. And that's what we need to do. And I'm working with colleagues now to start to do that. So to start to think about outturn modelling. Again, that thing about what do you actually deliver on street compared to what you said you would? How many schemes can you actually turn out with the money you have? And then leading from that, starting to do outcome evaluation. What is actually the outcome of spending that money? How does it improve things? For pedestrians, for cyclists, for drivers, for public transport, what's the actual benefit? And I'm working with colleagues to do that now. So again, this is kind of a warning that we will be coming back and asking you, as the deliverers, to help us with that, to help us with the base data, help us with the understanding, the before and after analysis, to allow us to go and wind the handle and produce that validated evaluation that helps us with that argument. We're considering how we could build a delivery dashboard to allow us to take all that information that you've put into our website about delivery, about scheme delivery, about what you wanted to deliver, what you have delivered, how programmes have been delivered and slipped and been reprogrammed, or whatever else you've done. How can we turn that into a dashboard that's useful for you as authorities to see what's happening and is useful for us to be able to make that story about how the sector is delivering? And we're working on that at the moment, and how we take the data you provided and produce something that's usable, not just for us as engineers, but also for normal human beings as well, because that was something that'd be really useful. And we're also starting to think about how we provide feedback for you, because we know that actually the challenge process was very fair in some ways, in that it didn't ask you to complete very complex 57-page questionnaires to get the money. It didn't require you to spend as much in bid preparation as we actually awarded you. It was a simple process that allowed you to undertake a fairly simple challenge and then be awarded the money. But it's not necessarily always easy for people to understand why Authority A was successful and Authority B wasn't successful. So we want to produce some guidance that will allow us to give that feedback in a way that doesn't kind of point the finger at people that did badly, doesn't criticise overly, but is useful in you. Assuming we use the challenge process again, and I hope we do, because it has been a very efficient way of handing funding out, but assuming we use it again, help you to ensure that you understand where your deficiencies might be and how you can be more successful in the future. So, completely change of subject. So, there's some interesting things in the Premier League table. And this obviously is before the weekend, so things have changed. But there are some interesting things there. What the hell are Nottingham Forest doing third in the Premier League? How did that ever happen? What the hell's happened to Arsenal recently? And actually, of course, after this weekend, what the hell's happened to Man City as well? All very interesting questions that I want to delve into in more detail. No, I don't actually. No, I don't. The reason I've put that up there is because there is an innovation on there that the BBC have delivered in the last few years, which is really helpful. And it's the right-hand side. It's the little squares on the right-hand side, which means that you can very quickly see, without going through the figures, you can very quickly see how teams are performing. And you can very, very quickly see that the manager of Newcastle United is probably a little bit more worried at the moment than the manager of Liverpool is. You don't need to look through the figures. You can just see by the colours how the teams are performing. And I looked at that and thought, well, that's really useful. That's a really useful way of just thinking generally about quite a complex, multi-dimensional problem and giving a simple way of understanding that. So we've started to think about how we could apply that to the answers you gave us for TSOG and GLF, and start to think about, that we asked you to answer 7 challenge questions. You did. We can then start to grade how successfully you did at answering each of those questions, and we can start to produce a kind of heat map that looks a little bit like the Premier League, the way they do it, or the way the BBC do it for the Premier League, and starts to give a feel for that. So we're working on this now, and this is a draft version of it, so it may change, but we intend to be able to produce a graph like that allows you to see, as authorities, where you have and haven't been particularly successful, and where other authorities around you maybe have been. And then, you know, we're not doing this. We're not kind of giving any great detail, but it allows you to see. And maybe as a particular authority, you've done badly somewhere, but your neighbour's done well. Then you can have a discussion with them and say, well, how did you answer that question? What did we do that you didn't do? How did we not do so well? It just gives that general feel. And this will be produced and available on the TTF website sometime in the next hopefully few weeks, but certainly by Christmas we'll have something like that available to just get that understanding of how people performed. And behind that there will be more detailed analysis, and this will be available on the TTF website, but this will be available only for each authority. So only you as your authority will be able to see this more detailed table, and your neighbours will be able to see their detailed table. But again, we colour code this, so we see the authority Council Y over there. I'm fairly sure they got funded because it's pretty much all green. Council Z on this side, probably not awarded because there's an awful lot of red in there. But again, now within each individual question, you can see where you were successful in slightly more detail and where you weren't. And we want to provide this because we want to ensure that everybody is able to approach the challenge process as well as they possibly can. This will be happening fairly shortly as part of this process of evaluation and feedback. Again, to ensure that should we run this process again, I hope we do. Should we have the opportunity to get more money out into the sector in the next few months or years, I hope we do. Then we're able to give you some feedback about how you performed. The thing I haven't yet mentioned is ITMF. Now, I have been thinking for the last few events, kind of the last 9 months or so, it would be a lot easier if I just turned up at events with a T-shirt saying, I don't know about ITMF on it, because that's kind of been the question that everyone wants to ask me, and I understand why that's the case. And for those of you that maybe didn't know or forgotten, we announced all 3 programmes, TSOG, GLF and ITMF at the same time. Last autumn, we were able to get the first 2 out very quickly because they were quite simple things to do. They were about asking you about maintenance and thinking about maintenance. We got those out before the election, we got the money awarded, and obviously that's now been spent. ITMF was more complex. ITMF is about innovation. It's much more innovation-focused fund, and it's a slightly different source of money, but it's £20 million that we wanted to award to authorities to be a lot more innovative. And it took us longer to get that process into shape, to be able to start to ask people to bid. And we know that a lot of interest has been generated in the sector about that, and quite rightly, because we were asking people to be innovative and use new technology and new ways of working and bring new products to the sector and work with SMEs and all the other good stuff that we need to do if we want to innovate. And we know that generated a lot of interest. But sadly, we weren't able to complete that process before the general election, and as the election was announced, we then had to pause it. We couldn't really run a process like that during a general election. We had to pause it, and it's been paused ever since. And since the new government has been in office, that they've obviously done quite a detailed root and branch review across the whole of government and within each department around spending and around the spending commitments that the previous government had made. Now, sadly, and some of you may know this already, because yesterday I was able to write to the chief execs of all the eligible authorities. Any of you with good administrative systems in your authorities may have already had that letter fed down to you. But sadly, we've had to cancel ITMF. We won't be taking it forward. The funding for that was offered up as a saving in the department, and that means it's not going forward. The text there is the text that's in the letter. There's not really an awful lot more I can say about it at the moment, because it sort of is what it is, really. So we've written to local authorities. We've sent a very simple letter which basically says that as part of a spending review, we find ourselves unable to take this forward. We're very, very heartened by the enthusiasm and the kind of ambition that people showed in putting together ITMF bids. We want to keep that process going. The TTF is a way for us to do that. It's a way to keep that discourse going. We want to encourage authorities, absolutely, to continue having those discussions, to continue talking to suppliers, to continue talking to new entrants into the market. Suppliers, we don't want you to kind of take all the ambition off the table. We want you to keep thinking about ambitious products. I think reading the tea leaves, I don't think this decision is a critique of technology or technology innovation. I don't think government has in any way said we don't think that actually technology innovation is really worth spending on. We don't see that as the future. It's absolutely not that. It's about some fairly simple things, such as Anthony said earlier, that the plan for drive has been very much a creature of the previous government and maybe slightly tainted in the eyes of the new government in some respects. That's led to questioning of some of the initiatives that Plan for Drive has proposed, ITMF included. And it was also caught up by the government's well-publicised desire to remove unfunded spending from government and the belief that the previous government had made a lot of unfunded spending commitments. And technically, the way that the Treasury looks at these things, ITMF was an unfunded commitment. So those two fairly political, very technical reasons have stopped us being able to take that forward. But that doesn't mean the ambition to move forward has gone away. It absolutely hasn't. And I'm absolutely certain that we will find different ways to fund that innovation because it's crucial to us delivering the future that we want. And the policy spotlight session this afternoon, you'll hear from colleagues from DFT talking about different policy areas. And they all ultimately will need pragmatic trials. They will need practical demonstrations of the policy areas and the ambitions that we have for technology. That will need something, maybe not, it won't be ITMF, but something similar where we actually get innovation on the ground and get it working. So I have no idea what will replace ITMF. I, like Anthony, are very confident that something will, and I want the sector to continue thinking in those ways and continuing to focus on the potential of technology and innovation because something will come along. And when it comes along, when that opportunity comes along, I want the sector to be as ready for it as it was for ITMF. So thank you. I think the last thing to say, I've got two last things to say really. First thing is, I want today to be a celebration of how well TSOG and GLF are going and not a wake for the demise of ITMF because I think we need to focus on the positive here and the fact that we are still in the process of delivering successfully a bigger chunk of funding than the sector has ever had before and we're starting to reap the benefits of that. So we should be very proud of that and we should be focused on shouting about that and making the most of it. And ITMF isn't happening and that's very sad. But it's not the end. There will be some funding in some form that we can take on. So I think that's really what I wanted to say. So thank you very much.
And even though we're running tight on time, I know that Darren is keen, if there were any immediate questions, to have the opportunity to answer them. So I'm going to check again whether any hands go up, and in the event of them not, I do have a question, Darren.
I would be surprised if you didn't.
Which is, I want to take you back to what you were saying about evidence, because we keep banging on to these guys, we want evidence of good things happening. But you talked about outcome. I don't know, I'm guessing, like me, many of you in the room will have felt constrained by the tyranny of time saving when you're trying to create a DFT-compliant business case. It's all about time savings, and if you're not saving time, if you're costing time, that's a bad thing, which is bizarre, really, in a world where many of you are going to be engaged in schemes which are prioritising walking and cycling over driving. So I'm just wondering, what would you like by way of help in the outcome arena that will help? Bearing in mind, the Secretary of State has said she is determined to review the Department for Transport's approach to appraisal and writing of business cases, so we can expect some change to come through as part of the integrated transport strategy. What could these guys do to help?
I think it's a very interesting point now. I think you're absolutely right. The view on time saving, or the focus on time saving, does make it hard to evaluate the benefits we should be looking for. But I think maybe one point is to start to think about the value of time for transport users, not vehicles. And I think there's a focus at the moment on time saving for vehicles, which generally means that we want to reduce congestion, make networks run faster. One of the ways of doing that potentially is to reduce the amount of pedestrian facility, for example. If you think about the agent rather than the vehicles, you think about how do you make journeys faster and more reliable for everybody, just whether that person is walking, on a bike, in a bus, in a car. That gives you a slightly different approach. So I would say that you're right, the rules will change. And the key now is to ensure that when the rules and when the way we evaluate changes, that we do have the base information to allow us to make the best of that change. So just be very careful about the types of things you collect. And if you are starting to collect data, if you are starting to think about doing analysis of schemes before and after or whatever, come and talk to us and come and have a chat with us, because we can then maybe help you count the right things that actually may not be relevant for an evaluation now, but may be very, very relevant for an evaluation under the new form of evaluation, whatever that ends up being.
Thanks, Darren. Thanks. I think this is I think this is really important for you to think about. So I was at the Transport Planning Society yesterday. I heard Lillian Greenwood saying that she was very interested not in the, if you like, the old-fashioned, the established economic calculations, so much as if you're trying to do things to make a place more livable, well, what makes the place more livable, and how is it that the things you're doing is making that so? So thinking about what are you trying to achieve and how what you're doing contributes to that, absolutely central to the new government's thinking.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, in that case, I think we'll let Darren go and we'll move on. Darren, thank you very much.
Thank you.